The diner door creaks the moment Elliot pushes it open, and that sound alone carries enough tiredness to match the weight on his shoulders as he walks in unnoticed, dressed like a man who has lost more miles of road than he could ever count, perfectly fitting the disguise he needs for what's about to happen. The smell of old fryer oil hangs in the air, and a couple of customers glance up with that mix of pity and dismissal reserved for strangers who look like they barely have enough to pay for a cup of coffee. This is exactly why the title of his mission matters so much today, because a billionaire ordering the cheapest meal should never be recognized as someone who built an empire, yet he can't shake the feeling that something here will test him more than he expected. He sits in the corner booth, keeping his head low, worn cap shadowing his face, waiting to see how a man who brings almost no value to the register is treated. When Lily approaches, her smile hits him like a warm light cutting through a cold morning, soft and honest in a way he has not felt from anyone in years. She notices his tired hands, cracked from the fake manual labor he pretends to do, and addresses him with a gentle "sir" that carries respect instead of routine. He feels something stir inside him, something that makes him wonder how she sees worth in someone who looks so worn down. Before he can process the unusual kindness, she is already offering water without him asking, already treating him like he matters, and a strange, quiet question rises inside his chest. Why does this waitress care more about him than managers he pays 6 figures? And even deeper, what is she about to reveal without realizing it? And how will her warmth collide with the truth he came here to uncover? Elliot watches Lily move with a rhythm that feels out of place in a struggling diner, her steps light and careful, as if each customer deserves a moment of peace no matter how little they spend. When he orders the cheapest meal on the menu, she doesn't push anything more expensive, doesn't try to upsell, doesn't repeat the robotic line corporate training taught years ago. Instead, she glances at him with a sympathetic look, vanishes behind the counter, and returns carrying a plate where the portion is clearly bigger than what the kitchen usually sends out. She sets it down quietly, leaning closer so others don't hear, whispering that she added extra fries from her own break meal because he looked like he needed it more today. That small act hits him harder than he expects, reminding him of a company he built with heart before big investors turned everything into spreadsheets. While Lily works, Elliot scans the diner, noticing the way cooks rush with tension in their shoulders, the way another waiter wipes down a table while glancing nervously toward the kitchen door, as if afraid of something. These small signs begin forming a puzzle that tells a darker story about what goes on behind the scenes. But Lily stands apart from all of it. Even under pressure, she moves like someone who refuses to lose her humanity, and Elliot feels the slow burn of rising concern mixing with admiration. What is she protecting? What is she enduring? And most importantly, why is she the only person doing the right thing in a place drowning in corners cut far too close? The longer Elliot observes, the more the cracks in his own empire become visible through the walls of this diner. The manager storms out of the back shouting about inventory sheets, waving a clipboard as if it were a weapon, not noticing or caring about the customers who flinch at his tone. He snaps at the cook for being too slow, even though Elliot saw the man juggling 2 broken appliances and a clogged fryer. A young server tries to explain that a customer received the wrong order, but the manager dismisses her complaint, rewriting the issue on the report so it doesn't reflect poorly on him. Elliot recognizes the pattern instantly. This is not a single bad shift. This is a system built on fear and denial, a system he unknowingly allowed to grow inside his own company. Each moment pricks at him with guilt, because this restaurant carries his name, his logo, his promise, and yet he barely recognizes the values he once fought for. The tension in the room coils like a wire pulled too tight, showing him a place that has forgotten what service means. And yet, Lily remains a soft light amid the chaos, offering apologies customers shouldn't need, soothing co-workers who look ready to quit. As Elliot watches the manager manipulate numbers on a sheet that should reflect honest work, he feels something heavier than disappointment settle in his chest. This isn't just a failing store. This might expose a flaw spread across his entire chain, and with that realization comes another question he can't ignore. How much worse will this get before he's forced to step in? The breaking point arrives when the manager turns on Lily in front of everyone, accusing her of wasting product because she gives away too much kindness. He raises his voice loud enough for customers to stare, embarrassing her for the simple act of caring. Lily stands frozen, eyes wide and cheeks flushed, holding a plate she hasn't even served yet. and Elliot feels a surge of outrage that threatens to blow his cover right there. Lily stammers an apology, though she did nothing wrong, and the way she shrinks under the verbal attack tells a story of repeated humiliation. A sinking feeling spreads through Elliot's chest as he realizes this isn't an isolated moment. This is how she has been surviving every day under a leadership that treats compassion like a flaw. The emotional weight pressing down on her reveals something even deeper about the culture infecting the place. A rot that isn't limited to one store, but could be spreading through layers of management he trusted for far too long. Elliot grips the edge of his booth, caught between the need to expose everything properly and the urge to stand up for her instantly. The pressure builds inside him like steam trapped in a closed pot, each second pushing him closer to the moment he won't be able to stay hidden. And as the manager walks off muttering threats, Elliot knows the question pounding in his mind won't leave him alone. Should he reveal the truth now, or swallow his anger just a bit longer to gather what he needs for a complete reckoning? By the time the dinner rush slows and customers trickle out, Elliot has already made his decision. The humiliation he witnessed iced any doubts he had, and now there is no turning back. He watches Lily clean the tables with tired motions, pretending everything is fine, even though her spirit looks bruised. There is something deeply wrong in this restaurant, something that goes beyond low sales and poor management. It is a place where kindness is punished and fear is used as a tool, and Elliot understands that if he walks away now, the problem continues unchecked, not just here, but anywhere a manager like this has taken root. So he remains seated, waiting for closing time, letting the disguise protect him long enough to learn every hidden truth. Determination settles into him like a firm anchor, pushing him into a path that will change the course of this night and, eventually, his entire empire. The air inside the diner grows heavy as the staff moves through their end-of-shift tasks, unaware that the turning point of their lives sits quietly in a corner booth. Elliot glances once more at Lily, seeing both exhaustion and hope flicker in her expression, and something inside him tightens with resolve. He isn't here just to observe anymore. He is here to act, and the question that now drives everything forward is simple and terrifying. How much more will he uncover before the moment arrives when he must finally reveal who he is? Before we go on, pause the video for a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever kept quiet about something at work just to avoid trouble. Because what Elliot is about to see behind that kitchen door is exactly the kind of moment that makes people wonder if staying silent is worth it. Go ahead and comment now. It really helps the story continue. Elliot stayed seated for a moment after Lily walked away, letting the last customers leave and the hum of the old fridge fill the diner with a tired sort of silence. And when he finally stood to stretch his legs and drift toward the back, he carried with him the weight of everything he had just witnessed. Lily caught sight of him near the kitchen entrance and hurried over with that same quiet sincerity, apologizing for the wait, even though she had been running non-stop the entire shift. He told her the food was fine, but she didn't believe it, not with the way her brow tightened as she glanced toward the clattering pots behind the swinging door. When she pushed that door open and motioned for him to step aside so a cook could pass, Elliot caught a glimpse he wasn't supposed to see. A pan shoved under a counter because it wasn't fully cleaned, boxes with dates rubbed off, and a stack of thawed items sitting too long on a metal surface. Rosa, the cook, worked quickly, but with the look of someone who kept her head down to stay safe, her eyes flicking toward the manager's office like she expected him to appear at any second. Everything about the space felt wrong, rushed, and filled with fear. Nothing like the proud kitchens he used to inspect in the early days when the company still had heart. Lily slipped back toward him and whispered another apology even though none of this was her fault, her voice wavering like someone carrying more stress than her shoulders were made to hold. She tried to straighten a pile of plates, but her hands were shaking just enough for Elliot to notice, and that sight brought a knot to his throat he hadn't expected. She explained that things had been different once, that people here used to care, but lately everyone worked scared, waiting for the manager to explode over something trivial. She said it softly, almost like she wasn't supposed to speak the truth out loud, and Elliot felt a deep ache settle into him at the idea that his own chain had allowed this kind of fear to grow. Rosa approached them cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron, and her eyes landed on Lily with a kind of protective sadness that made Elliot realize these two were holding the place together with nothing but kindness and overworked patience. A metal tray clattered in the sink, and they all jumped slightly, proof of how tense the staff had become. The manager's voice echoed from the office, sharp enough to make the kitchen fall silent again. Lily shrank a little, not physically stepping back but carrying that familiar posture of someone who knows kindness can be punished here. Elliot watched her breathe through it, holding herself together with a dignity she didn't even know she had. The sight stirred something deep inside him, something mixed with worry and a sense of responsibility, heavier than the disguise he wore. Rosa leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear as she nodded subtly toward Lily, and there was a tremble in her words that held more truth than any clipboard the manager waved around earlier. Rosa looked at him with tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much decay in a place meant to be better, and whispered the quiet question that froze him for a moment and pulled him deeper into the heart of the dilemma he had created without meaning to. She asked him if he could help Lily, asked it like a last hope spoken to a stranger she didn't know was the very man who could change everything. And that simple question wrapped around Elliot's chest, making him wonder not just what he could do, but what he must do now that the burden was placed directly in his hands, no longer hidden behind reports or spreadsheets, but alive and trembling right in front of him. 3 words whispered in desperation became a promise he knew he would have to answer. Lily's break came later than it should have, and Elliot could tell she had pushed herself through the last half hour just to make sure the other server finished their shift without getting yelled at again. She stepped outside to the small bench behind the diner, the one squeezed between the dumpster and the cracked brick wall, a place that never looked peaceful, yet somehow felt like the only corner where she could breathe. Elliot followed her out lightly, not wanting to startle her, and when she saw him, she gave a tired smile that carried more apology than joy, like she thought she needed to explain why life had worn her down, even though none of it was her fault. She sat, rubbing her hands together to ease the stiffness, and he sat beside her in silence for a moment, letting the night air soften the heaviness between them. When she finally spoke, it came out in a confession so quiet it felt like she was afraid the walls might report her. She said she had thought about quitting more times than she could count, but every time she got close there was someone who needed her kindness, some lonely customer who only opened up to her gentle voice, some regular who came in just to feel seen. Elliot listened with a heaviness that came from realizing how much of the heart he once built into his company had faded away everywhere except in people like her, people the system never rewarded. Her voice shook when she said she didn't know how much longer she could hold on, and he felt something shift inside him, something that pulled him closer to admitting a truth he still had to hide for now. He told her she had a rare gift, the kind that doesn't show up on performance charts, the kind that can change someone's whole day without them even noticing. She looked away, as if compliments made her uncomfortable, and she explained that kindness didn't fit well under this manager's style, that caring too much had turned into something that put a target on her back. Elliot felt the sting of that, knowing his own leadership layers had allowed people like the manager to act with no consequences. Lily let out a long breath, saying she stayed, because if she left, the diner would become unbearable for the remaining staff, and for the old couple that came in every Wednesday just to talk to her. There was vulnerability in the way she said it, like she wasn't proud of the struggle, but couldn't pretend she didn't feel responsible for people she barely knew. Elliot found himself wishing he could reveal who he was, tell her she didn't have to carry all that weight alone. But the time wasn't right yet. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and admitted she felt foolish for trying so hard, in a place that treated her like a problem instead of a blessing. That moment landed deep in his chest, making him realize the exact piece his empire had lost along the way, the soul she carried naturally. And right here, when Lily speaks about staying because people depend on her warmth, it's a moment that touches anyone who's ever felt torn between giving up and holding on for the sake of others. It's the kind of feeling many listening right now have lived too, carrying more than they should, staying kind in places that didn't always deserve it. Moments like this remind everyone they're not alone in that struggle, and the comments often show how many people are silently going through the same thing, finding comfort in knowing others understand. When the silence settled again, it wasn't heavy anymore, just honest, the kind of pause that tells two people they finally see something in each other that wasn't clear before. Elliot thanked her softly, not with big words or speeches, but with the quiet sincerity of someone who had finally found the missing part of something important. Lily blinked a few times, caught off guard, asking why someone like him would thank her. He just said people notice kindness even when it's hidden behind exhaustion, and that seemed to loosen something in her chest. She exhaled slowly, as if letting go of a knot she'd been carrying for months. For the first time, she allowed herself to open up without fear, telling him how she felt lost between doing what she believed was right and what the job demanded. Elliot listened closely, feeling admiration grow into a kind of responsibility he couldn't escape anymore. He was beginning to understand that Lily wasn't just an employee caught in a bad place. She was a mirror, showing him what his company should still stand for. Just as Lily relaxed, almost smiling for the first time that evening, the sound of a shoe scuff against the concrete broke the calm. The manager stood half hidden near the door, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, having heard enough to twist the moment into something dangerous. Lily stiffened instantly, fear flashing across her face before she tried to cover it with a polite expression Elliot now recognized as self-protection. The manager muttered something under his breath, something sharp and cold, and walked back inside with a pace that carried intention. Elliot felt his stomach tighten as he watched the man disappear. Sensing a storm brewing beneath the surface, Lily swallowed hard, trying to brush it off, but Elliot could see she knew exactly what that look meant. And in that moment, a small hook settled in the air like a chill that warned of trouble approaching, leaving Elliot with a new worry he couldn't name yet, but knew he had to face soon. The manager had a plan, and whatever it wasn't going to be fair, kind, or gentle. Something was coming, something that could push Lily past her breaking point, and the thought made Elliot feel the weight of his responsibility more than ever. Elliot felt the shift the next morning, the moment Lily walked through the diner doors. She looked a little paler, a little quieter, like the manager's shadow had followed her from last night into the new day. She checked the schedule on the wall and her face fell, the kind of slow fall that comes when disappointment is too familiar to feel surprising anymore. Hours cut, shifts rearranged. Her days pushed into the slowest times, the ones that barely gave her enough tips to cover gas. She didn't complain, didn't even sigh loudly. She just stood there with that tight little swallow in her throat, trying not to let the hurt show. Elliot watched from his booth, pretending to read a menu he already knew by heart, frustration rising in him like heat he couldn't hide much longer. When Lily walked over to pour him coffee, she apologized again, as if her reduced hours were something she caused, and he gently told her she owed no one an apology. She looked away quickly, but he caught the shimmer of something in her eyes, something tired, but still holding on. She told him she guessed she had overstepped by caring too much, repeating the exact words the manager had thrown at her, and hearing them come from her lips made Elliot clench his jaw so hard it almost hurt. She tried to brush it off with a smile, but her shoulders didn't match her face, and Elliot realized she was starting to believe the cruel things said about her. That pushed him from quiet anger into a deeper protectiveness he hadn't expected. When the manager stepped out of the office, acting smug as he barked orders across the room, Elliot noticed he hovered too long near Lily, waiting for any excuse to correct her. He took notes in his small notebook, the one he used for inspections years ago, writing down every mistake the manager made, every careless threat, every shortcut. Lily caught him writing once and asked softly if he was keeping track of miles for tax purposes, assuming he was still just a trucker doing his best to get by. Elliot nodded, letting the assumption stay, even though something in his eyes must have given away his worry for her. She thanked him for being someone easy to talk to, someone who listened without judging, and that small moment told him their conversation the night before had mattered more to her than she admitted. It helped her breathe again today, even if just a little. What Elliot didn't know yet was how much these small decisions, these moments of quiet watching and quiet caring, would shape everything that happens later, turning into the very evidence and courage needed when the truth finally comes out. The morning stayed tense. The manager made Lily redo a table that was already clean, then threatened to write her up for clocking in too cheerfully, as if kindness itself was some kind of rule violation. Elliot could feel Lily shrinking inside herself with every small humiliation, and the guilt he carried grew heavier with each passing moment, knowing he had built a system where someone like her could be treated this way without anyone in corporate noticing. He told her during a calm moment by the drink station that she deserved better, that some people confuse authority with cruelty because they don't know how else to feel important. She looked at him with a surprised softness, like no one had ever said that out loud before. She admitted that she sometimes wondered if she was naive for believing kindness could still make a difference in places like this. Elliot told her that kindness was never the problem. People misusing power was. Something eased in her face at that, a little spark of recognition, like maybe she wasn't wrong for trying. But that spark didn't last long. The manager called a mandatory staff meeting for the afternoon, his tone sharp, his posture stiff, and Lily stiffened too because she already sensed what it meant. He wanted a stage. He wanted an audience. He wanted her cornered, where her warmth wouldn't save her. Elliot felt the air shift as the announcement hung over the staff like a warning bell, and Lily tried to keep working, even though her hands trembled with each movement. He watched her take a breath that didn't quite fill her lungs, and he saw the exact moment she realized she might be walking into a trap. Elliot closed his notebook slowly, the decision forming in him like a quiet storm building strength. Something was coming, something designed to break her spirit, and he knew he had to be ready because this time he wasn't just a silent witness. He was involved now, tied to her by truth she didn't know yet, and every injustice he watched sharpened the urgency beating inside him. The staff meeting started with the kind of tense silence that makes people look at the floor, pretending they aren't scared of what's coming. Everyone gathered near the prep counter, trying to keep space between themselves and the manager, who stood with his arms folded like a judge waiting to hand out sentences. Lily walked in last, her steps small and careful, but Elliot noticed the hint of resolve in her eyes, a quiet fire that hadn't been there earlier. The manager began by listing performance concerns, his voice sharp enough to cut through any hope of fairness, and when he pointed at the co-worker who had struggled most during the shift, the room felt even smaller. Lily stepped forward before she could stop herself, saying clearly that the co-worker had followed procedures and that the real problem was the freezer that hadn't been repaired despite repeated reports. The manager's expression hardened, and the energy in the room shifted like air before a storm. Lily didn't back down. She added that serving thawed items without proper temperature checks could make customers sick, her voice steady, even though her hands shook. That sentence hung in the air, and Elliot saw the exact moment it struck a nerve. The manager turned on her with a glare that made the rest of the staff shrink. He mocked her tone, called her too soft to work in a real kitchen, said she cared more about feelings than rules, twisting the truth into a weapon. Lily's face flushed, not from shame but from shock, like she couldn't believe someone would attack her for simply telling the truth. She tried to explain again, but he talked over her, raising his voice louder and louder until customers turned their heads from the dining area. Elliot felt his hands tightening at his sides, fighting the urge to step in right then. He watched Lily swallow hard, her breath catching as the manager announced she might be written up for causing confusion. The staff looked away, helpless, and the manager dismissed everyone with a wave, satisfied with the damage he had done. Lily slipped outside the back door right after the meeting ended, moving fast like she needed air before her chest collapsed under the weight of everything thrown at her. Elliot followed without calling her name, letting her have a moment before stepping closer. She leaned against the cracked brick wall behind the diner, hugging her arms to her chest as if trying to hold herself together. She wiped at her face quickly, but a tear still escaped, landing on her sleeve, and she let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, the kind that comes from being strong for too long. Elliot stood near her, giving her space, but staying close enough to show he wasn't leaving. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were full of the kind of tired pain that makes a person wonder why they keep fighting for places that never fight for them. He told her she had been brave, that standing up in that room took more strength than anything the manager had shown. She looked down, shaking her head, saying bravery didn't matter if it only caused more trouble for everyone else. Elliot gently reminded her that truth matters even when people try to silence it, and she took a shaky breath, letting the words settle somewhere deep. She confessed she had hoped things would get better, that maybe kindness could fix the cracks if she kept holding the pieces together long enough. Elliot could hear his own past in her voice, the early days when he believed pure heart would guide everything, before numbers and pressure buried the warmth behind the brand he created. Watching her break down stirred something heavy in him, not guilt alone, but a longing to protect what she represented, a reminder of the person he used to be when he started the company, with nothing but a dream of serving others with dignity. The evening air cooled around them, and the distant sound of traffic mixed with the faint buzz of the diner lights humming through the wall. Lily rubbed her hands together, grounding herself, remembering the weight of the day. She glanced at the door like she expected the manager to come out and punish her for simply breathing. Elliot took a slow step closer and told her gently that none of this was her fault, that none of the cruel words thrown at her came from truth. She let out a long exhale, leaning her head back against the wall, and for a moment they stood in a quiet understanding that didn't need explanation. The cost of kindness was written all over her posture, and the courage to speak up was still trembling in her shoulders. She finally whispered a sentence so soft Elliot almost missed it, but the heartbreak in it struck him deeper than anything he had heard that day. Lily said, barely louder than the breeze, that maybe this job wasn't worth saving. Elliot stayed long after the dinner crowd had faded, sitting in the same corner booth where everything had begun, letting the soft hum of the overhead lights guide his thoughts into a quiet kind of certainty. The staff moved around him, sweeping crumbs, wiping down tables, counting tips with tired hands. He watched Lily slip out the back door earlier, shoulders low, steps slow, the fire she had shown in the meeting now dimmed by the weight of humiliation. Seeing her walk away like that made something settle inside him, something firm and solid that left no room for hesitation. Enough was enough. He waited until the last customer left, then stood up with the kind of calm that comes from knowing the next step cannot be undone. He moved through the diner unnoticed, heading toward the office he once imagined would be a place of leadership, only to find it cluttered with excuses and negligence. The door was cracked open, and the messy stacks of papers on the desk showed every shortcut the manager had taken. Elliot began quietly gathering evidence, taking photos, reading falsified reports, and flipping through food safety logs that hadn't been touched in months. Each page added weight to a truth he already knew, but needed to see with his own eyes. He heard footsteps and turned sharply, but it was only the dishwasher finishing up, unaware of the storm forming in the heart of the man pretending to be a trucker. Elliot nodded at him and returned to the files, his hands steady now, his anger shaped into purpose. He thought of Lily outside, wiping tears with the back of her hand, and he knew the time for watching from the sidelines was over. The company he built had lost its way, but he wasn't going to let it crumble on the backs of the people who carried the real soul of his dream. Even the air felt different as he worked, like the diner itself was holding still, waiting for something to break open. When Lily quietly returned through the back door to finish her cleaning shift, he saw the exhaustion on her face, the sadness she tried to hide behind professionalism. She apologized to him for the mess, even though she wasn't responsible for any of it. He stepped closer, telling her with a calm voice that things were going to change sooner than she thought. She looked up, confused, searching his face for a meaning she couldn't guess, because she still believed he was just someone passing through, someone with no power to fix anything. Her eyes softened for a moment, like she wanted to believe him, even though life had taught her not to trust hope that came too easily. She thanked him for listening, for caring, for being someone who saw her when others only judged. He wanted to say more, wanted to tell her everything, but the timing wasn't right yet. Instead, he let the promise hang between them, warm enough to ease her breathing a little. She walked away with slower steps, as if that little spark of reassurance had taken some weight off her shoulders. Elliot returned to the office, ready to finish collecting proof that would justify the decision forming in his heart. He opened another drawer, finding more signs of neglect, warnings ignored, maintenance requests deleted, schedules manipulated to punish the workers who cared most. It all lined up perfectly with the pain he had watched unfold over the last 2 days, and he knew that tomorrow needed to be the day everything changed. As he leaned over the desk, reading through a stack of altered reports, the room suddenly grew colder. A shadow filled the doorway. The manager stood there, eyes narrowed, arms crossed, the kind of stare that wanted to corner someone into fear. Elliot straightened slowly, no longer hiding his posture, no longer shrinking into the role of a tired trucker. This was the moment when disguise had to fall away, when truth stepped forward. The manager demanded to know what he was doing, voice rising, but Elliot didn't flinch. For the first time, he met the man's glare with the full calm of someone who had nothing left to hide. That single change in his stance made the manager pause, confusion flickering through his expression, as if realizing the stranger in his office was not as powerless as he believed. Elliot held his gaze, steady and unshaken, the turning point hanging in the air like a spark, right before lightning strikes. And moments like this always raise the same questions for anyone watching. What would you do if you finally reached the point where you couldn't stay silent anymore? And how do you think this manager will react when he learns who Elliot really is? Share your thoughts, subscribe if these stories move you, and keep following along, because what happens next comes from the kind of truth people rarely get to witness up close. Elliot took one slow breath, ready for the dawn that would change everything. Elliot didn't move when the manager stepped into the office doorway, blocking half the light, arms crossed like someone ready to scare a stranger out the door. But Elliot wasn't the same man who walked into the diner yesterday, pretending to be tired and harmless. He stood a little straighter now, shoulders solid, gaze steady, as if the disguise had finally fallen off his skin even before he spoke a word. The manager barked at him, asking what he thought he was doing, why he was touching confidential files, and why a trucker had any business snooping through a desk he didn't belong near. Elliot let the accusations roll past him like wind, feeling the calm that comes right before a truth becomes too big to hold back. When he lifted his head fully and stepped into the light, the manager looked confused for the first time in days. Like something about the way Elliot carried himself didn't match the man in worn boots and a faded jacket. Elliot said his full name quietly, not loudly or dramatically, but with the weight of someone who has nothing left to hide. It took a second for the manager to process it, his face shifting from annoyance to disbelief, and then to a fear he didn't know how to swallow. He stuttered, asking if this was some kind of joke, but Elliot opened a folder on the desk and placed it between them, showing the falsified logs, the ignored warnings, the missing maintenance forms. The truth sat there on the desk like a mirror the manager didn't want to look into. His voice broke as he tried to explain everything away, scrambling for excuses, blaming staff, blaming supply issues, even blaming Lily for the problems that started long before she ever worked here. The panic in his voice filled the room, spreading into the small hallway until the dishwasher poked his head in, curious about the noise. More staff gathered, drawn by the tension, drawn by the strange power shift they could feel without anyone naming it. Elliot didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. Every word he spoke was calm and measured, each sentence bringing another layer of truth into the open. He explained the safety violations he'd seen, the paperwork that had been altered, the staff that had been threatened into silence. The manager tried to interrupt again and again, but each time, his excuses collapsed under the evidence laid in front of him. Staff members exchanged glances, some nervous, some relieved, all stunned as they realized the quiet man in the corner booth wasn't just a customer watching their pain. He was the founder, the man whose name sat on every menu, every door, every paycheck they depended on, and he had seen everything. Lily walked in during the middle of it, wiping her hands on a towel, unaware of the storm she was stepping into. She stopped cold when she saw Elliot standing beside the desk with the manager shrinking in front of him. Her eyes darted from one face to the other, her breath catching mid-step. Elliot looked at her gently, his expression softening for the first time since the confrontation began. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out, her mind trying to connect the man who sat in her section ordering the cheapest meal with the man in front of her now. The one employees whispered about in corporate stories, the one whose picture had once hung in the training binder. Her hands shook and she took a step back, bumping into a chair, whispering his name as if tasting disbelief on her tongue. The rest of the staff stared at her, realizing she had served extra fries to the man who built the entire company, and shock rippled across the room. The manager tried to take advantage of her confusion, stepping forward to throw blame on her again, but Elliot shut it down with one quiet statement that froze the air. He said Lily was the only one in the building who had lived up to the values the brand was founded on, the only one who treated customers with dignity, the only one who put people before profit. Lily looked overwhelmed, her eyes filling with something between fear and relief, like she wanted to run and stand tall at the same time. She didn't know where to put her hands, didn't know how to breathe in a room that suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too full of truth she wasn't prepared for. The staff watched her for cues, watched Elliot for the next move, watched the manager crumble into excuses that no longer sounded like words, just noise. And this is the moment where anyone listening has to wonder what they would do in Elliot's place. Would they reveal the truth now and risk breaking someone's world open, or wait a little longer to protect the person who deserves better? And what would you say if you were Lily, hearing that the man you served with kindness was actually the one person with the power to change everything? Share those thoughts, because they shape how stories like this grow. Lily took a slow breath, her voice small but steady as she asked Elliot if he really meant what he said, if he truly saw something good in her when all she had done was try to survive. Elliot nodded, telling her the truth he'd been holding on to since the moment she slipped those extra fries onto his plate, without expecting anything in return. He told her kindness was rare, that integrity was even rarer, and that both were worth fighting for. His words hung in the room, thick with emotion, and Lily pressed her hand to her chest as if trying to keep her heart from pounding out of control. The manager's voice cracked again, trying to regain control, but the staff no longer looked afraid of him. Something had shifted, Something had broken loose. Elliot could feel the beginning of the end settling into place, the start of a transformation he had delayed for far too long. He knew the reveal today would send shockwaves far beyond the diner's walls, and he also knew that Lily's reaction, whatever it became, would shape the direction of everything that came next. She looked at him with a mixture of awe and hurt, still trying to understand how the man she comforted outside last night was the same man standing tall and unshaken before her now. And with that tension filling the room like electricity before lightning, Elliot stepped forward, ready for the next blow, knowing this was only the beginning of a truth that would shake everything he built. The room stayed frozen a long moment after Elliot stepped forward, the truth settling into every corner of the diner, like the last piece of a puzzle nobody wanted to believe was real. The manager's excuses faded into a mumble, and the staff stood in stunned silence, watching the man who had walked among them, as a stranger reveal himself with a calm that felt heavier than shouting ever could. Lily still held the towel in her hand, fingers clenched around the fabric, eyes wide with the weight of everything she had just learned. Elliot noticed how she kept searching his face, trying to find the trucker she had spoken to outside, the man she had opened her heart to, the man she thought had no power except kindness. He knew he had to talk to her away from the chaos, away from the manager's trembling voice and the staff's shock. So he asked her softly if she could step outside with him for a moment, and she nodded even though her legs looked unsure. They walked toward the back door, passing by eyes that followed them with a mix of hope and fear, as if everyone sensed something about this conversation would change more than just the shift. Once they stepped into the cool air behind the diner, Lily leaned against the brick wall, breathing slowly, as if her lungs were trying to catch up with her thoughts. She looked down at her shoes, then at Elliot, then back down again, unable to settle her focus. He waited, giving her a moment to gather herself, and when she finally looked up, her voice was barely above a whisper. She asked him if she should apologize for anything she said to him, for the times she spoke openly about how broken things had become, for serving him extra fries from her own meal, thinking he was just a worn-out man who needed a little kindness. Elliot shook his head gently, telling her she didn't owe him a single apology, that not one word she had spoken to him came from anything but honesty and care. He told her she had been the only one in that diner who remembered what the company was supposed to stand for in the first place, the only one who put humanity above speed, the only one who kept the heart of his dream alive, even when management had let everything rot around her. Lily blinked quickly, eyes filling again, but this time the tears carried something softer, something like surprised gratitude tangled with fear. She asked him why he never told her who he really was, why he let her believe he was just someone passing through. Elliot told her he needed to see the truth with his own eyes, not the version polished for inspections or hidden behind reports. He said he needed to feel what customers felt, needed to understand how staff were treated when nobody important was watching. Lily wiped her cheek, taking in his words slowly, and she confessed she didn't know how to act around him now, because part of her felt guilty for speaking so openly, and part of her felt scared that everything she had said might put her job at risk. Elliot stepped closer, lowering his voice, telling her she had nothing to fear from him. He said the only people who needed to worry were the ones who hurt her, the ones who twisted her kindness into weakness, the ones who forgot that respect was the foundation of every good business. He watched her shoulders relax just a little, watched the hurt begin to shift into something else, something like cautious hope. Then he told her something that hit her harder than the reveal of his identity. He said she represented what he wished every location still carried, what the company had lost as it grew bigger and colder, what he had been searching for without realizing it. For a moment, Lily didn't speak. Her eyes slowly filled, not with embarrassment this time, but with the overwhelming shock of being seen, truly seen after years of feeling invisible. She pressed her hand to her mouth as if the emotion tasted too strong to swallow. Elliot stayed right there, steady and calm, letting her take the time she needed. When she lowered her hand, she whispered that she wasn't special, that she had flaws, that she messed up like anyone else. He nodded and agreed that everyone makes mistakes, but he reminded her that character isn't measured in perfection. It's measured in choices, especially the hard ones. Lily looked away for a second, the breeze moving her hair, and she spoke so quietly that Elliot had to lean in to hear her. She said she kept showing up because she didn't want the customers she cared about to lose the only gentle thing left in their day. The words carried a depth that struck him straight in the chest, and when Lily said that, it echoed the way so many people out there keep going, because someone depends on their kindness, even when they feel unseen. It's one of those moments where listeners across different places might quietly nod to themselves, feeling the same mix of duty and heart that holds them in place, even when the world around them forgets the value of simple care. Moments like this remind everyone they're not facing that feeling alone, not the only ones carrying more than they can explain. Elliot reached out, not touching her, but letting his voice be the steady anchor she needed in that moment. He thanked her sincerely, and without hesitation, for carrying values he feared were gone. He thanked her for standing up in the staff meeting even though she knew it would bring trouble. He thanked her for her heart, for the warmth she showed strangers, for the humanity she never let go of, even when it cost her peace. Lily's chin trembled as she listened, and she whispered that she didn't know if she deserved praise for something that only brought her pain. Elliot gently reminded her that doing what's right often hurts before it heals, and that people like her were the reason he ever wanted to build something bigger than himself. She gave a small nod, the kind someone gives when a truth finally sinks in deep enough to settle a wound. Inside, the staff began gathering near the door, unsure of what would happen next. They peeked out at the two of them, waiting for answers, waiting for decisions that could reshape their futures. Elliot saw them watching and told Lily something she didn't expect, that everything was about to change, not just for her, but for the entire company. She looked at him, confused, and he smiled gently, telling her she would understand soon. There was a warmth in his words, a reassurance that felt like a light at the edge of a long, dark tunnel. But there was also suspense, the kind that comes right before a door opens into a new life. Lily's breath caught again, and she asked him what he meant, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. Elliot didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked back toward the diner, toward the people waiting for him, toward the empire he had built, and the values he was ready to repair. He turned back to Lily and told her she had a place in those changes, a place she never expected, but one she had already earned without even trying. Her eyes widened, heart pounding loud enough that she felt it in her throat. She didn't ask what role he meant. The question lived in her eyes all the same, and Elliot knew the next step would change everything for both of them. The air around them felt tight with possibility, charged with the weight of decisions not yet spoken. The staff waited, Lily waited, and Elliot stood there on the edge of a choice he had carried for years without knowing how much he needed this moment. What came next would shake the empire from its roots. Elliot stood in the hallway for a moment after speaking with Lily, feeling the weight of everything shifting inside him, like the whole diner was holding its breath while waiting for his next move. The staff was still gathered near the kitchen doors, whispering softly, eyes full of questions they didn't dare ask aloud. Lily lingered behind him, not quite ready to step into the crowd, her hands nervously twisting the towel she carried as if it were the last piece of security she had left. Elliot could feel the tension in the air, the kind that comes when truth starts pulling old roots out of the ground. He took a deep breath and walked into the center of the diner, and every pair of eyes turned toward him. The manager stood stiff and pale near the counter, pretending not to be afraid, but the tremor in his jaw gave him away. Elliot reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number only a few people in the company had. When the corporate office answered, his voice stayed calm and steady, but the words came out with a firmness that made everyone straighten their backs. He explained the situation, naming each violation, each falsified report, each neglected warning, each attempt to silence the people who were simply trying to do their jobs with dignity. The manager tried to interrupt, insisting that Elliot didn't understand the full picture, but Elliot held up his hand, telling him quietly that he had seen more than enough. The staff watched in silence as Elliot described the fear culture inside the diner, the schedules manipulated out of spite, the equipment left broken for months, and the way Lily had been punished simply for caring about the people she served. Lily stared at the floor, overwhelmed, her shoulders trembling slightly each time he said her name with respect instead of blame. When Elliot finished laying out the truth, corporate promised immediate action and asked to remain on the line for further instructions. Elliot stepped aside for a moment, letting the words settle, letting the staff breathe, letting the world inside the diner adjust to the reality of a leader who had finally come back to take responsibility for what had been lost. Then he turned toward everyone and spoke with a clarity that softened the room. He said he had returned to the chain to rebuild it from the inside out, and that this location would be the starting point of a new initiative focused on compassion, fairness, and authentic customer care. He explained that the company had grown cold over time, losing the warmth it was built on, and that Lily's actions reminded him of the values he had forgotten. Lily looked up, startled, her breath catching as she realized her small acts of kindness had influenced something much bigger than this little diner. Elliot told the staff that their work mattered, that their voices mattered, and that no one should fear coming to work. The manager tried once more to speak, but Elliot's calm stare stopped him, and for the first time the manager looked smaller than the position he abused. And as everything shifted toward this new future, a quiet sense of warning lingered in the air, hinting that the choices being made today would echo far beyond this moment, shaping consequences that none of them fully understood yet, and reminding anyone listening that change always stirs up a storm before the calm returns. The staff slowly gathered closer, forming a loose circle around Elliot, their expressions softening from fear into something else, something like cautious hope. They asked small questions at first, voices trembling, trying to understand what this new initiative really meant. Elliot explained that it wasn't just a policy change, it was a cultural reset. He said he wanted to rebuild from the heart outward, and that the first step was to remove the kind of leadership that hurt instead of helped. With the corporate representative still on the phone, Elliot announced that the manager would be suspended immediately pending full investigation, and several employees exhaled for the first time in hours. Lily raised her head a little, surprised, like she didn't expect anyone to risk so much just to protect the people lower in the chain. Elliot looked at Lily then, directly and without hesitation, and thanked her in front of everyone. He told the staff that her courage had exposed the truth he needed to see, that her actions had reminded him why he built the company in the first place. Lily felt dozens of eyes turn toward her, and she instinctively stepped back, overwhelmed, not wanting to be the center of attention, but Elliot reassured her, saying kindness wasn't a weakness, that it had saved the diner in a way reports and charts never could. The staff nodded slowly, understanding something deeper now, that the way they treated each other mattered just as much as the food they served. Lily's eyes softened as she listened, tears glistening but not falling, and she whispered that she never meant to cause trouble. Elliot replied that she hadn't caused trouble. She had brought light into a place that had gone dark. The dishwasher stepped forward timidly and said he wished he had spoken up sooner, that he had been scared of losing the only job he could find. Elliot told him he understood, and that fear like that was exactly what he planned to erase from the company. The cook nodded in agreement, saying Lily had always helped everyone without expecting anything back. For a moment, the entire staff seemed to gather around her warmth, realizing that her quiet strength was the spark for everything happening now. Lily took a small step forward, unsure, and thanked Elliot for listening even when he didn't have to. She said she wasn't sure what came next, but she felt something inside her shift. Like a window opening in a room she thought was permanently closed, Elliot could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the kind that comes when life suddenly offers a new path and you don't know if you're brave enough to take it. He didn't push her. He simply said she had a place in the company's future if she wanted it, and that her heart would guide the changes he hoped to bring across every store. Lily swallowed hard, her heartbeat loud in her ears, feeling both honored and terrified. The staff watched her with soft encouragement, sensing that something important was taking shape. Elliot told them he would spend the next day reviewing every part of this location, from equipment to training, and that they would rebuild together. He promised them today wasn't an ending, it was the beginning of something better. As the staff slowly dispersed to finish closing tasks, Lily remained still for a moment, absorbing everything, her hands finally relaxing at her sides. She looked at Elliot with eyes still unsure, but glowing with a faint hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Elliot held her gaze with a quiet promise, understanding that the next decision she made would determine not only her life, but the soul of the company he was trying to restore. And as the lights dimmed inside the diner, the future hung in the air between them, waiting for the choice only she could make. The diner felt strangely quiet once the staff drifted back to their closing tasks, their movements slower, almost gentle, as if afraid to break the fragile hope floating in the air. Elliot stayed close to Lily, watching her as she tried to steady her breath, her fingers brushing the side of her apron, like she needed something familiar to cling to. She still looked overwhelmed, stunned by everything that unfolded in such a short time, and Elliot could see she hadn't yet absorbed the full meaning of the shift that had begun. He asked if she wanted to step outside again, and she nodded, her voice too shaky to form words. The night air greeted them with a cool softness, brushing against their skin like a reminder that the world outside the diner kept moving, even when life turned inside out. Lily leaned against the wall again, but this time she wasn't breaking. She was gathering herself, holding the swirl of disbelief, fear, and something new she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. She asked him what would happen next, her voice small, uncertain, like she was bracing for him to say something that might push her further into confusion. Instead, Elliot took a slow breath and told her he wanted to talk about her future, not just her next shift. Lily blinked, startled by the seriousness in his tone. She whispered that she wasn't sure what kind of future he meant, because she was still trying to understand the idea that the man she'd served fries to was the founder of everything around her. Elliot smiled softly, not at her confusion but at the honesty in her words. He said he had thought long and hard about what the company truly needed, and that all the policies, numbers, and systems he once trusted had failed because they had lost sight of something simple: how people feel when they walk through the door. Lily listened with her arms wrapped gently around herself, as if hugging the truth too closely might make it slip away. Elliot stepped closer, his voice steady but warm. He told her that she had something he couldn't train, couldn't measure, couldn't demand from anyone. She had the heart he built the company on, the softness she tried to hide, the compassion she offered even when it cost her comfort, the patience she gave to customers and co-workers alike. Those were the pieces missing from the chain he created. Lily's eyes shimmered again, and she looked down at her hands as if they suddenly carried a weight she didn't recognize. She said she didn't think she was anything special, that anyone could do what she did if they tried hard enough. Elliot shook his head slowly, telling her that he had seen hundreds of employees across the country, talented people, skilled people, but few who carried warmth the way she did, few who could turn a stranger's bad day into something lighter just by being themselves. Her breath hitched, and she admitted she had never imagined being noticed for any of that. She said she thought kindness was just something she did to make it through the day, to make the hard parts hurt less. Elliot told her gently that kindness was exactly what made her extraordinary. He let the silence hold them for a moment before he said the words he had been carrying since the night before. He told her he wanted to offer her a role she never imagined, a regional trainer focused on restoring human warmth in customer service across the entire company. Lily froze. Her hands dropped to her sides, and she stared at him with an expression that was almost frightened, as if he had asked her to step into a world she didn't think she belonged in. She shook her head quickly, whispering that she didn't have the education for that she didn't know anything about training programs, that she barely made it through each shift without falling apart. Elliot stepped closer, not in pressure, but in reassurance. He told her she had already been training people without realizing it. Every time she soothed a co-worker who was scared of being yelled at, every time she guided a confused customer without making them feel small, every time she found a way to make a moment kinder than it began, she was teaching by example. He said people listened to her because they felt safe with her, and that safety was something no handbook in the company had managed to teach. Lily felt her heart squeeze tight in her chest, like it was stretching to hold something too big, too bright. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. When she finally found her voice, she asked him why he wanted her, why someone like her, who had been pushed down so many times, could possibly be the answer he was looking for. Elliot's expression softened into something deeper than admiration. He told her he had spent years building an empire that grew faster than he could protect it. He said somewhere along the way, the chain had forgotten that customers weren't transactions, they were people, and employees weren't tools, they were hearts carrying the weight of the business on their backs. He confessed that seeing her in action, seeing her care, seeing her stand up even when she was scared, reminded him of the version of himself he had lost. Lily swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in her throat. She felt exposed, like her whole life had been placed under a warm light that showed every flaw and every strength at the same time. She whispered that she wasn't sure she could do it, that she didn't want to disappoint him or anyone else, that she was afraid of failing. Elliot let those words settle between them, not brushing them aside. He said fear didn't mean she wasn't capable. Fear meant she cared enough to want to do it right. He told her she didn't have to know everything on day one, that he would guide her, that training could be taught but heart could not. Lily's voice cracked when she asked if he really believed she was the right person. He nodded slowly, saying she was exactly the person he had been searching for even before he knew it. The night deepened around them, and the outside lights cast soft shadows across the pavement. Lily wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, her breath shaking as she tried to process the idea of a life completely different from the one she had accepted for years. She looked toward the diner windows, where staff were cleaning in a way that finally looked hopeful instead of scared. She realized that her decision wouldn't just change her own life, it would shape theirs too. She turned back to Elliot, eyes full of disbelief, gratitude, fear, and a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. The possibility of belonging to a future she had never dared imagine. She opened her mouth, hesitated, closed it again, then finally whispered his name with a trembling voice. She said she didn't know how to say yes to something so big, but she also didn't know how to walk away from the chance to make life better for people like her. Elliot waited, not pushing, letting her shape the decision with her own courage. She breathed in slowly, like she was gathering every moment of strength she had left, and Elliot could see her heart standing on the edge of a new world, ready to step into it, even if her hands were shaking. And just as she looked up, ready to give an answer that would reshape both her life and his empire, the diner lights flickered, and a shadow moved inside, calling them back toward a moment that would decide everything. Lily stood there in the quiet corner of the parking lot, the night breeze brushing her cheeks, as if urging her to breathe, really breathe, for the first time in a very long time. Elliot waited without pushing, hands relaxed at his sides, showing her with his stillness that this choice was hers alone. She looked down, then up, then away again, like someone facing a door she never expected to open. Her heart was loud in her chest, a steady drum that carried fear and excitement in the same beat. She lifted her gaze, her eyes shining even in the dim light, and whispered that she didn't know if she was ready for the kind of life he was offering. Elliot stepped a little closer, the warmth of his voice grounding her, telling her readiness wasn't about feeling strong, it was about choosing to grow even when you're scared. She felt her breath tremble, felt something inside her shift, and for a moment everything around her became still, as if the world itself was waiting for her next word. Then she finally said it. She said yes, not loud or bold, but steady, honest, and full of the courage she never thought she had. Elliot let out a soft breath of relief, smiling with a pride that touched something deep inside her. He told her she had just changed not only her life, but the direction of his entire company. She laughed a little through the tears, shaking her head in disbelief because the truth of it felt too big to hold. But the moment she said yes, she felt her shoulders lighten, as if an invisible weight had finally been lifted. They walked back toward the diner together, side by side, and for the first time Lily didn't feel small next to someone powerful. She felt chosen, valued, and part of something larger than herself. Inside, the staff looked up as they entered, their faces filled with the kind of hope that only comes when the world turns in a new direction right in front of them. Elliot gathered everyone by the counter, the lights still bright over the half-cleaned floor, and he spoke about change not as a punishment, but as a new beginning. He told them Lily had accepted a role that would help lead the transformation of the entire company, a role built around the values she carried so naturally. Lily felt all eyes turn toward her, but for once she didn't shrink. Her heart raced, but her spine stayed straight, and something about the way Elliot looked at her helped her believe that maybe she really could grow into the person he saw. Some staff clapped quietly at first, then louder, and Lily covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by the kindness that came back toward her for the first time in a long while. Elliot explained how the store would receive new training, new leadership, new resources, and new respect. He said no one would be silenced for speaking up again, no one would be punished for caring. The manager was escorted out by a corporate representative who had arrived while they spoke, and the tension that left the building felt almost physical, like a heavy curtain finally lifted. Lily stood close to Elliot, watching her co-workers look around the diner with fresh eyes, seeing possibility instead of fear. She realized she had always wanted the place to feel this way, warm and safe and meaningful. Elliot leaned in and told her that tomorrow they would start planning her new path, that she would be trained, supported, and guided every step of the way. She nodded slowly, still unsure how she would manage everything, but filled with a quiet determination she didn't recognize as her own at first. He reminded her that she didn't have to become someone else to succeed. She just had to stay who she was. The staff reopened the front door to let in some fresh air while they finished cleaning, and Lily felt the breeze pass through the diner like a blessing. She walked behind the counter almost on instinct, picking up an apron even though her shift was technically over. Elliot watched her with a soft curiosity as she stepped into the familiar rhythm of preparing the last small order of the night. A tired man waiting at the counter smiled at her, not knowing anything about what had happened, not knowing that the woman serving him was about to help shape an entire company. Lily handed him his meal with the same gentle warmth she had shown Elliot on the first day. her kindness simple and quiet and real. And as she added a few extra fries to the plate without hesitation, Elliot felt something settle in his chest, something like peace, something like purpose. He realized that everything he wanted the brand to stand for had been living right here in this small diner, in this woman who believed kindness mattered even when the world didn't notice. The man thanked her, and she smiled in a way that made the whole room feel lighter. Elliot watched her closely, seeing how natural she looked, how her presence softened the edges of the place. He knew then that the initiative she would help lead wasn't just about training or scripts or procedures. It was about rebuilding the soul of the company around moments just like that, moments where someone like Lily made a stranger's day feel less heavy. She turned back toward Elliot, her cheeks still flushed from emotion, and he told her quietly that this simple act, this small plate of fries, had done more for his company than any meeting he had held in years. She blushed, shaking her head, but she didn't argue this time. She let the truth sit gently in her heart, settling into who she was becoming. As the diner finally closed for the night, the staff gathered near the door, hugging Lily, thanking her, encouraging her. She wasn't used to being the center of anything, but tonight she let herself feel the warmth, let herself believe she deserved to stand in this new light. Elliot walked her to the exit, telling her tomorrow was just the beginning, and she nodded with a calm she didn't expect to feel. The neon sign outside flickered softly, casting a glow across the pavement, and Lily looked at it with a small smile, realizing that even old lights can shine again when someone cares enough to fix what's broken. She took one last look at the diner that had both hurt her and helped her grow, then stepped out into the night with Elliot by her side, ready for the life waiting on the other side of dawn. And with that simple step, the legacy of a plate of fries turned into something far greater than either of them ever imagined. Before we end, let me ask you something from the heart of this story. If you were in Lily's place, would you have accepted a future so different from the one you knew, or would fear have held you back for a little longer? And if you were Elliot, would you have trusted someone so gentle with the responsibility of changing an entire company? Pause for a moment and share what this ending made you think or feel, because your voice helps keep these stories alive and connected across so many people listening along with you. Thank you for staying until the very end of this journey. If you reach this point, write your first and last name in the comments so I know you made it. And if the story touched you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me bring you more stories that warm the heart and shake the emotions. And when you're ready for the next tale, click on the next video, because if this one moved you with kindness and courage, the next one will take you even deeper into a life-changing truth you won't forget.